The alarm on my console screamed before my feet even touched the floor of the landing pod. My name is Zektel Vron, and I had exactly 4 seconds to understand why every warning light on our shuttle had turned red at once, over a planet that our own maps called peaceful. "Report," barked Captain Doran Kess, gripping the command rail as the shuttle rocked sideways. "Unknown atmospheric disturbance," I said, my claws sliding across the console. Wind speed just tripled. No warning, no pattern. "That's not possible," said Mira Selk, our pilot, her voice tight. "The orbital scan showed calm skies 10 seconds ago." I stared at the readings again, and they refused to make sense. 10 seconds ago, this had been the safest-looking planet in our entire survey list. Now the shuttle was being thrown around like a leaf in a storm that hadn't existed a moment earlier. "Stabilize us," Doran ordered. Mira's hands moved fast over the controls, but even her practiced skill barely kept us level. Outside the viewport, the sky had gone from a soft, welcoming blue to a churning gray, and lightning cracked across it in jagged lines that looked almost deliberate, like the planet itself had noticed us and decided to react. I want to explain, before I go further, why this moment mattered so much to me. Our vessel, the Patient Curiosity, had been sent to catalog a world called Sol 3 by its inhabitants, but known to the wider coalition simply as Earth. Every planet in known space carries a danger classification, from level 1, meaning gentle and welcoming, all the way up to level 12, meaning a world so hostile that visiting it without heavy protection is considered a serious mistake. Earth's file, when I opened it back on the ship, had only 3 words where the classification number should have been. Classification: pending. Do not engage. Nobody on the crew took that seriously. Our scans from orbit had shown mild gravity, breathable air, gentle temperatures, and no obvious predators larger than we were. My captain called it the easiest assignment of the year. I believed him. That belief lasted right up until our shuttle hit that first wall of wind. "There," Mira said suddenly, pointing at a break in the clouds. "Set her down there, quickly, before the next gust." The shuttle dropped hard, bounced once against the ground, and finally settled into stillness. The storm outside continued to howl, but we were down, and for a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing and the tick of cooling metal. "Everyone report status," Doran said, already unstrapping himself. One by one, the crew called out that they were fine, shaken but unharmed. I checked my own limbs out of habit, the way any careful scientist would, and found nothing broken. Still, my hands would not stop trembling. "That wind came from nowhere," I said, still staring at my readings. "There is no explanation in the data for a storm to form and vanish in the amount of time it happened." "Welcome to Earth," said a low voice from the back of the shuttle. I turned to see Yulin Faro, our oldest crew member, sitting very still in his seat, his eyes fixed on nothing. Yulin had been added to our mission at the last moment, after the crew member originally assigned to atmospheric studies had unexpectedly requested a transfer the instant she learned our destination. I remembered thinking it was strange at the time. Now, watching Yulin's face, pale and tight, I understood there was more to that transfer request than anyone had explained to me. "You knew this would happen," I said. "I knew something would happen," Yulin answered quietly. "I did not know what. Nobody ever knows what, with this place. That is exactly the problem." Doran cut in before I could ask more questions. "Save the ghost stories, Yulin. We have a mission. The Coalition needs an updated survey of this world, and we are the ones assigned to deliver it. Zektal, gather your samples. Mira, keep the engines warm in case we need a fast departure." I nodded, though my body still felt heavy with unease. Outside the viewport, the storm had begun to calm as quickly as it had arrived, the clouds thinning until soft afternoon light spilled across a wide green meadow. Tall grass bent gently in a breeze that now felt almost apologetic, as if trying to convince us the violence from moments before had been a mistake. It looked, in that instant, like paradise. I remember thinking, foolishly, that perhaps the storm had simply been an unlucky coincidence of weather. I remember telling myself that our sensors must have missed a natural pressure system building somewhere over the horizon. I remember wanting, quite badly, for that explanation to be true. Doran opened the hatch himself, stepping down first, boots sinking slightly into soft soil. "Air is breathable," he said, glancing at the small device on his wrist. "Gravity is within comfortable range. Temperature is mild. This does not look like a level 12 world to me. It barely looks dangerous at all." I followed him out, my scanner already active, recording every detail of the world around us. Flowers dotted the grass in small clusters of yellow and white. Somewhere in the distance, birds called to one another in overlapping songs. A soft stream cut through the meadow not far from where we stood, its water clear enough to see smooth stones resting beneath the surface. "This is beautiful," said Mira, stepping out behind us, her earlier tension already fading from her voice. "I almost feel foolish for being nervous a moment ago." "Do not let your guard down," Yulin said from the hatch, refusing to step onto the grass. "This planet does not need to look dangerous to be dangerous. That is the entire point of it." Doran waved a hand, dismissing the warning without much thought. "Yulin, if you are too frightened to assist with the survey, remain with the shuttle. The rest of us have work to do." Yulin said nothing further, but he did not step down either. He stood in the hatchway, arms folded, watching the meadow the way a person watches a sleeping animal they do not fully trust. I began my sampling near the stream, collecting small amounts of water, soil, and plant matter into sealed containers. Every reading came back ordinary. The water contained common minerals, the soil held healthy amounts of organic matter, the plants showed simple, expected structures, nothing alarming, nothing unusual. And yet, as I knelt there filling my containers, I noticed something that made me pause. A single insect, small and unremarkable in appearance, landed on the edge of my collection tray. I studied it for a moment, before gently nudging it away with the back of my hand. The insect did not fly off. Instead, it turned toward my hand, and to my surprise, it bit down hard enough that I felt it clearly through my glove. I pulled my hand back sharply, more startled than hurt, and stared at the tiny creature as it calmly crawled off my tray and disappeared into the grass, entirely unbothered by the encounter. "Did you see that?" I asked Mira, who had been collecting samples nearby. "See what?" "That insect. It bit me. Something no larger than my smallest claw just tried to bite through a protective glove without hesitation." Mira laughed softly. Perhaps it did not like being disturbed. I wanted to laugh with her, but something about the moment stayed with me. On every world I had surveyed before, small creatures fled from unfamiliar contact. This one had chosen, instead, to fight back immediately, without fear, without warning, and without any apparent concern for its own safety, against something many times its size. I recorded the encounter carefully in my log and continued my work, though the trembling in my hands had returned. As the afternoon stretched on, Doran called the team together near the stream to review our initial findings. The mood among the crew had shifted from caution to comfort, and several of them spoke about how pleasant the assignment had turned out to be, despite the rocky start. "I am recommending we classify this world as Level 3, Doran said, reviewing the data on his handheld device. "Perhaps Level 4, accounting for that unusual storm earlier. Nothing here suggests the danger implied by the pending classification." "With respect, Captain," I said carefully, "I believe we should continue observing before finalizing any classification. The storm behaved unlike any natural weather pattern I have studied, and the local insect life shows unusually aggressive behavior for creatures of such small size." Doran considered my words for a moment, then nodded. "Fair caution. We will continue observations through tomorrow before submitting a final report." As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of orange, I found myself standing near the shuttle, watching Yulin, who still had not stepped fully onto the grass. "You have been quiet," I said, approaching him. "I have been thinking," he replied. "About what?" He turned to look at me, and for the first time since we had landed, his eyes held something other than fear. They held memory. About how every world that is truly dangerous never announces itself with obvious danger, he said. The most dangerous places do not warn you with monsters at the border. They welcome you in gently, let you relax, let you believe you understand them, and only later, once you have lowered your guard completely, do you begin to understand what you have actually walked into. I wanted to ask him more, to press him on what exactly he meant, but Doran called us both back toward the shuttle to prepare for the evening's rest cycle. As I turned to follow, I glanced once more at the peaceful meadow around us, the soft grass, the clear stream, the gentle birdsong drifting on the breeze. It still looked like paradise. But for the first time since arriving, I found myself wondering what paradise might be hiding beneath its calm, welcoming surface, and whether we had already begun making mistakes we would not fully understand until it was far too late to correct them. Morning on Earth arrived quietly, but I woke already tense, my mind replaying the insect bite and Yulin's words from the night before. Captain Doran wasted no time organizing the day's tasks. We split into 2 teams, he said, standing at the shuttle's open hatch. Mira and Nathan will study the plant life along the ridge to the east. Zektal and I will follow the stream south and examine the water source and any animal activity nearby. Yulin, remain with the shuttle and monitor communications. Yulin nodded silently, though I noticed his eyes lingered on me a moment longer than necessary, as if he wanted to say something and had decided against it. The stream Doran and I followed cut a gentle path through the meadow before disappearing into a stretch of trees ahead. The morning air smelled clean, faintly sweet, carrying the scent of unfamiliar flowers. Birds continued their overlapping songs from the branches above, and for a while, our walk felt almost peaceful enough to forget the tension of the previous day. "You have been unusually quiet since the storm," Doran said, glancing sideways at me as we walked. "I am simply being thorough," I answered. "This world does not behave the way our scans predicted. I would rather understand it fully before we submit any final classification." "You sound like Yulin. Perhaps Yulin has reasons for his caution that we do not yet understand." Doran did not respond to that, and we continued walking in silence until the trees thickened around us, filtering the morning light into soft patches on the forest floor. It was here, only a short distance into the tree line, that we first noticed the tracks. They were large, deep enough to have been left by a creature of considerable weight, spaced in a pattern that suggested a slow, deliberate walk rather than a hurried movement. I knelt beside one print, measuring it carefully with my scanner. "This is significant," I said. "Whatever left this track is far larger than anything our orbital scans detected." Our scans were focused on population centers and obvious threats, Doran admitted. "We may have underestimated the wildlife in less populated regions." We followed the tracks a short distance further, moving carefully, until we reached a small clearing where the trees opened into dappled sunlight, and there, standing calmly at the edge of the clearing, was the creature that had left the prints. It stood on 4 thick legs, its body covered in dense fur, the color of dark soil, with a wide head and small, watchful eyes. It was, by any reasonable comparison, an animal of modest size next to some of the true giants I had studied on other worlds. And yet something about the way it held itself, utterly unbothered by our presence, sent a chill through me that I could not easily explain. "Do not move suddenly," Doran whispered, raising his scanner slowly. The creature turned its head toward us, studying us with calm, unhurried interest, the way one might study an object of mild curiosity rather than a potential threat. It did not flee, it did not display aggression, it simply watched, as though deciding whether we were worth its attention at all. After a long moment, it turned and walked unhurriedly back into the trees, disappearing from view as easily as it had appeared. "That was remarkably calm behavior," Doran said, lowering his scanner. "Perhaps this world's larger animals are simply not aggressive toward unfamiliar visitors." I said nothing, though privately I found the encounter unsettling in a way I struggled to put into words. The creature had not been afraid of us. It had not needed to be. Whatever instincts guided its behavior clearly did not include fear of two strangers standing in its territory, and I found myself wondering what kind of world produced animals so entirely unbothered by potential danger. We continued our survey through the late morning, collecting samples and recording observations, until Doran's communicator crackled to life with Mira's voice, tight with urgency. "Captain, you need to see this. Nathan's scout drone just went dark near the ridge." "Define dark," Doran said, already turning back toward the shuttle. Completely unresponsive. One moment it was recording normally, the next moment the feed cut out entirely. "We are heading back to investigate the last known location now." Doran and I hurried back through the forest, retracing our path along the stream until we reached the meadow, then continued east toward the ridge where Mira and Nathan had been working. We found them standing over a small pile of shattered components that had, until recently, been a fully functioning scout drone. "What happened?" Doran asked, crouching beside the wreckage. "We are not entirely certain," Nathan admitted, his voice unsteady. "The drone was recording footage of local wildlife when something moved quickly into frame. The footage becomes unstable after that point, and then the connection simply ends." I knelt beside the wreckage, examining the shattered casing carefully. The damage was precise, almost surgical in nature, as though something had known exactly where to strike to disable the device most efficiently. "May I see the recorded footage?" I asked. Mira handed me a small data drive, and I connected it to my own device, watching the final seconds of recorded footage with growing unease. The drone's camera showed a peaceful hillside, dotted with small burrows in the ground. Then, without warning, a creature emerged from one of the burrows, moving with startling speed toward the drone. It was smaller than I expected, covered in gray fur, with sharp claws that flashed briefly in the footage before the recording became unstable. The creature had not simply avoided the drone or fled from it. It had actively pursued and disabled it, treating an unfamiliar flying object as a problem requiring an immediate and decisive response. "That animal cannot be larger than my forearm," I said quietly, and yet it destroyed advanced equipment without hesitation. "Perhaps it mistook the drone for a threat to its burrow," Doran offered. "Perhaps," I agreed, "but consider what that means. A creature that small, on nearly every world I have studied, would flee from an unfamiliar object rather than confront it directly. Here, its immediate response was confrontation, and that response proved effective enough to disable equipment built to withstand considerable impact." Doran studied the wreckage a moment longer before straightening. "We will note the incident in our report. For now, let us continue the survey with additional caution around ground burrows." As the day continued, similar patterns began to emerge, each one small on its own, but together forming a picture I found increasingly difficult to ignore. We observed insects capable of delivering surprisingly potent stings to creatures many times their size. We found plants whose thorns had clearly evolved specifically to discourage even the largest browsing animals. We discovered evidence of old conflicts between predator and prey that suggested neither side ever fully gained the advantage for long, each one adapting endlessly in response to the other. By late afternoon, I had gathered enough data to feel a growing certainty that Earth's ecosystem operated on principles far more demanding than any I had encountered before. Nothing here survived by luck. Everything here survived by constant, relentless adaptation, generation after generation, in a struggle that apparently never allowed for complacency. It was during our final hour of fieldwork that we made the discovery that would change everything. Nathan, examining an exposed section of rock near the base of the ridge, called us over with visible excitement. "Look at this layering," he said, pointing to distinct bands of stone stacked one atop another. "These are fossil deposits, and judging by the depth and separation, they span an extraordinarily long period of this planet's history." I examined the rock closely, my scanner identifying the age and composition of each layer. What I found left me staring in stunned silence for several long moments. "Doran," I finally said, "you need to see this." He crouched beside me, following my scanner's readout as I explained what the data revealed. Each layer represented a distinct period in Earth's history, and between several of these layers existed clear evidence of massive extinction events, moments where the vast majority of life on this world had been wiped away entirely. "This is not unusual," Doran said. "Many worlds experience extinction events over long periods of time." "Look at what happens after each event," I said, highlighting the layers directly above each extinction marker. "On every world I have studied previously, recovery from a mass extinction takes an extraordinarily long time, often longer than the extinction event itself, as surviving life slowly rebuilds toward its previous complexity. And here, recovery happens remarkably quickly, and each time, the resulting life forms show greater diversity and greater resilience than what existed before the extinction. This world does not simply survive catastrophic events. It appears to use them as opportunities to become stronger." Doran remained silent for a long moment, staring at the layered rock as though seeing it for the first time. "5 separate extinction events," I continued, my voice quieter now. "5 times this world lost the vast majority of its living creatures, and 5 times life did not merely recover, it returned faster, fiercer, and more capable than before." "That is a remarkable pattern," Doran admitted. "It is more than remarkable," I said. "It suggests that whatever conditions exist on this world, they do not simply permit survival. They demand constant improvement, constant adaptation, under the harshest possible pressure, without exception, across the entirety of this planet's history." We stood in silence for a while, the implications settling over all of us. Around us, the peaceful meadow continued exactly as it had since our arrival, gentle and calm, offering no obvious indication of the relentless pressures that had shaped everything living within it. It was Mira who finally broke the silence, her voice carrying a note of unease none of us had heard from her before. "If the environment itself produces creatures this capable," she said slowly, "what does that mean for whatever intelligent life eventually rose to dominate it?" Nobody answered her question immediately, though I suspect each of us had already begun to consider it privately. As if in answer to her words, our communicator suddenly crackled with an unfamiliar transmission, faint and distant, carried on frequencies our systems had not been actively monitoring. Doran adjusted the receiver carefully, and slowly, a voice began to emerge from the static, speaking in a language none of us recognized, calm and unhurried, discussing something we could not yet understand. "Is that," Nathan began, "a local transmission?" "It appears to be," Doran said quietly. "Which means this world is not merely inhabited by capable wildlife." He looked up at each of us in turn, his expression more serious than I had seen it since our arrival. "This world already has a species capable of transmitting organized communication across long distances," he said. "Which means we are no longer simply surveying an unusual ecosystem. We are making contact with an intelligent species that evolved here, on a world that has spent its entire history demanding nothing less than constant improvement from everything living upon it." The meadow around us remained just as peaceful as it had been since our arrival, the breeze just as gentle, the birdsong just as pleasant. But for the first time since landing, none of us found any comfort in that peace at all. That night, sleep would not come to me easily. I lay in my small quarters aboard the shuttle, listening to the distant sound of wind moving through the meadow grass outside, and found myself replaying every observation from the day, searching for some detail that might explain the growing sense of unease inside me. Eventually, I gave up trying to rest and made my way to the shuttle's small communication station, where I intended to request access to older coalition records regarding Earth. If our current data was incomplete, I reasoned, then perhaps something in the deeper archive might explain why this world's classification had been left as pending for so many generations. The station's screen glowed softly in the darkness as I typed in my request, expecting the usual simple confirmation and file transfer. Instead, the system returned an unusual message. "Access restricted. Clearance level insufficient." Request denied. I stared at the message for a long moment, surprised. In all my years serving aboard survey vessels, I had never encountered a restriction so absolute on basic historical records. Curious now rather than merely uneasy, I tried a different approach, searching instead for any mention of the term Level 13, which I had heard whispered once or twice among older crew members but never seen used officially. The system paused longer this time before returning a result. One file found. Access restricted. Clearance level insufficient. Request denied. A single file existed then, somewhere within the Coalition's vast archives, referencing a term that should not have existed at all within a classification system that only recognized 12 levels of danger. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing through possibilities, until a quiet voice behind me made me jump. "You will not find what you are looking for through official channels," Yulin said, standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You startled me," I said, recovering my composure. I did not expect anyone else to be awake. "I rarely sleep well on this world," he replied, stepping into the small room and taking a seat across from me. "I suspect I never will again, after everything I witnessed here." My pulse quickened at his words. "You have been here before." He nodded slowly, his eyes distant, as though looking through me toward a memory rather than at me directly. "Many years ago, before you joined this crew, before most of the crew currently aboard this vessel were even born, I served aboard a different ship, one sent to this same world under very different circumstances." "What circumstances?" Yulin was quiet for a long moment, and I worried he might refuse to answer at all. Finally he spoke, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of something long carried in silence. "The Coalition's earliest encounter with this world was not a survey mission like ours," he said. "It was intended as a demonstration of strength. A fleet of considerable size arrived in this system, intending to establish contact through a show of overwhelming capability, the way the Coalition had done successfully with dozens of other developing civilizations before. What happened? The inhabitants of this world had not yet achieved travel beyond their own solar system," Yulin continued. "By every measure the Coalition used to judge developing civilizations, they should have been simple to impress, easy to intimidate into peaceful cooperation. That is not what occurred." I leaned forward, my attention fully fixed on him now. What did occur? "The fleet's arrival was detected almost immediately by ground-based systems the Coalition had not accounted for," Yulin said. "Within a remarkably short period of time, this world's various governments, which the Coalition assumed to be fractured and quarrelsome, based on limited observation, began coordinating with a speed and precision nobody expected. Communication systems, previously believed dedicated to entertainment and simple messaging, revealed hidden capabilities. Defensive measures believed outdated by Coalition standards proved far more adaptable and effective than anticipated. Did conflict occur?" Yulin's eyes flickered briefly with something like old sorrow. The fleet commander attempted careful, non-hostile posturing, believing a controlled demonstration of capability would encourage the population toward peaceful negotiation, as had worked on other worlds. Instead, the response from below was immediate, coordinated, and disturbingly effective. Within hours, the fleet suffered losses none of us had anticipated, not through any single overwhelming attack, but through countless small, precise actions taken by numerous separate groups, all adapting to our presence faster than our own analysts could adjust their assessments. How is that possible? A civilization without interstellar capability defending itself against an advanced fleet? That, Yulin said quietly, is precisely the question that haunted every survivor of that mission for the rest of their lives. This world's inhabitants did not fight as a unified, obedient force, the way Coalition worlds typically organize their defenses. They fought as countless independent groups, each one learning, adapting, and improving from moment to moment, sharing information faster than we could counter it. What should have been an easy demonstration became, within a single day, an experience none of us were prepared to survive without significant loss. I sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this account with the peaceful meadow surrounding our shuttle, the gentle streams, the pleasant birdsong. The fleet withdrew, Yulin continued, carrying with it a truth the coalition leadership found deeply uncomfortable to accept. A pre-interstellar civilization had inflicted meaningful losses upon an advanced fleet, not through superior technology, but through adaptability, coordination, and a complete refusal to panic under overwhelming pressure. Rather than admit such a truth openly, the decision was made to bury the encounter entirely, erasing detailed records and replacing this world's classification with a simple designation of pending, ensuring no future crew would approach carelessly, while avoiding the difficult admission that a young civilization had matched an advanced fleet in capability, if not in raw technology. And the term Level 13? Yulin's expression grew heavier, a private designation created quietly by those who survived the encounter, shared only among those with direct experience of this world. It exists nowhere in official coalition classification systems, precisely because acknowledging it openly would require admitting the depth of our miscalculation. Level 13 was never meant to describe environmental hazards, dangerous wildlife, or hostile terrain. It exists to describe something far more difficult to defend against. A species capable of matching an advanced civilization's response, not through equal technology, but through equal or greater adaptability under pressure. I sat back slowly, absorbing everything he had shared, my earlier observations from the day suddenly falling into a clearer, more troubling pattern. The insect that fought back rather than fled, the creature that disabled our scout drone with startling efficiency, the larger animal that regarded us with calm, unafraid curiosity rather than instinctive fear, the 5 mass extinctions this world had endured, each one followed not merely by recovery but by improvement. This world's environment demanded relentless adaptability from every living creature within it, I said slowly, thinking aloud, and its intelligent inhabitants inherited that same relentless adaptability, refined further through their own history and conflict. Precisely, Yulin said. The coalition did not encounter a civilization that happened to be difficult to intimidate. We encountered a civilization shaped entirely by a world that never once allowed complacency, not for a single generation, across its entire existence. Every living thing here has spent unimaginable spans of time learning the same brutal lesson. Adapt constantly, or be replaced by something that will. I considered his words carefully before asking the question that had been forming in my mind since he began speaking. If the coalition already understood this danger so many years ago, why send another survey mission at all? Why risk repeating history? Yulin sighed heavily. Because records fade, memories are buried, and eventually, someone within the coalition administration decides an old pending classification represents nothing more than an outdated bureaucratic oversight, worth correcting through a routine follow-up survey. I suspect our current mission exists precisely because someone believed the original warning had simply been forgotten paperwork rather than a deliberate, carefully guarded secret. Then our captain has no knowledge of any of this. None whatsoever, Yulin confirmed. Nor do most members of this crew. I was assigned to this mission specifically because I possessed direct experience with this world, though my formal orders describe my role only as atmospheric specialist, nothing more. I felt a chill settle over me as the full weight of our situation became clear. We had arrived on this world, believing it to be a simple, overlooked oversight in the coalition's records, when in truth, we had walked directly into the edge of history's most carefully hidden warning. We must inform Captain Doran, I said. Yulin shook his head slowly. Doran will not believe an unsupported account from an old crew member with no official documentation to support his claims. If we wish to convince him, we require evidence he cannot easily dismiss. Then we continue gathering evidence, I said, but with far greater caution than before. Yulin studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. Perhaps you understand this world better than I expected, for someone experiencing it for the first time. I returned to my quarters that night, but sleep remained elusive, my mind turning over everything Yulin had shared. Outside, the meadow remained peaceful under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, offering no outward sign of the relentless history hidden beneath its calm surface. The following morning, I approached Captain Doran privately, before the rest of the crew had gathered, carrying with me the accumulated data from the previous day alongside careful, measured language, avoiding any direct mention of Yulin's account until I could present it alongside solid evidence. "Captain," I began, "I believe we should reconsider our approach to this survey before proceeding further." Doran studied me carefully, clearly noticing the seriousness in my tone. "Explain." I laid out the evidence methodically: the unnatural storm upon our arrival, the insect that attacked without hesitation, the creature that regarded us without fear, the scout drone destroyed with startling efficiency, the fossil record showing 5 mass extinctions, each followed by accelerated recovery and increased resilience. Individually, these observations might seem unremarkable, I said. Together, they suggest a pattern far more significant than a simple oversight in an outdated classification. I believe this world's original pending classification was not a bureaucratic error, but a deliberate warning, hidden for reasons we do not yet fully understand. Doran considered my words carefully, his earlier confidence noticeably shaken. "What do you propose?" "I propose we proceed with extreme caution," I said, "and that we make direct contact with this world's dominant species, carefully and respectfully, in order to better understand exactly what we are truly dealing with, before submitting any final classification to the Coalition." Doran was silent for a long moment, staring out at the peaceful meadow beyond the shuttle's viewport. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "Prepare the team. We make contact today." As the crew gathered to prepare for our first direct encounter with this world's inhabitants, I found myself standing once more beside Yulin, who watched the preparations with quiet, guarded intensity. "Are you ready for this?" I asked him. "I have never truly left this world," he said softly. "Not entirely. Some part of me has remained here since the day our fleet withdrew, wondering if the Coalition would ever be foolish enough to return. And now that we have—" He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable once more. "Now we discover whether this generation of this world's inhabitants remains as capable as the one my crew encountered so many years ago. I sincerely hope, for all our sakes, that they have not grown weaker with time." Something in his tone told me he did not truly believe that hope would be rewarded, and as I turned to prepare for our approach into the unknown, I found myself sharing his quiet, unspoken certainty that we were about to discover exactly why this world had been so carefully, deliberately hidden from Coalition history for so long. We approached the nearest settlement on foot, leaving the shuttle hidden within a dense cluster of trees a short distance away. Captain Doran had insisted on this caution, unwilling to risk a repeat of whatever incident Yulin had witnessed decades earlier, though he still had not been given the full details of that account. The settlement, a small town nestled among rolling hills, came into view gradually as we crested a low ridge. Modest houses with pitched roofs lined quiet streets, smoke rising gently from a few chimneys despite the mild weather. A small sign at the edge of the road read Millbrook, though none of us understood the significance of that name at the time. "Remain calm and non-threatening," Doran instructed the team. "We approach slowly, communicate our peaceful intentions clearly, and observe their reaction carefully before proceeding further." We stepped out from the tree line into an open field bordering the town, and almost immediately a young voice called out from nearby. "Hello there!" I turned to see a small human child standing near a wooden fence a short distance away, staring at us with wide, curious eyes rather than fear. She appeared entirely unbothered by our unusual appearance, tilting her head slightly as she studied us. "Are you from the fair?" she asked. "My dad said there might be people from far away visiting this year." Doran hesitated, clearly unprepared for such a casual, friendly greeting. "We are visitors," he said carefully, choosing his words with deliberate caution. "We have traveled a great distance to learn about your world." The child, who introduced herself as Sophie, nodded thoughtfully, as though this explanation made perfect sense to her. "That's neat," she said. "You should meet my grandpa. He knows lots about the old days around here." Before any of us could respond, a woman's voice called out from the direction of the nearby house. "Sophie, who are you talking to?" The woman who appeared moments later, wiping her hands on a cloth as she approached, was tall and steady, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to careful, measured calm as she took in our appearance. If she felt fear, she hid it remarkably well, her posture relaxed, her attention sharp and observant rather than panicked. "Well now," she said, introducing herself as Ellie Marsh, "I don't believe I've seen visitors quite like you before." "We mean no harm," Doran said quickly. "We are simply here to learn about your world and your people." Ellie studied us a moment longer before nodding slowly. "All right then, why don't you come inside for a bit? I imagine you have questions, and I suspect we might have a few of our own." I glanced at Doran, surprised by how easily this invitation had come, expecting hesitation, fear, or at minimum cautious negotiation. Instead, we found ourselves welcomed into a modest kitchen moments later, offered simple food and drink, while Ellie calmly asked us questions about where we had come from and what had brought us to her small corner of the world. "You are remarkably calm," I said eventually, unable to contain my curiosity any longer. Most beings, upon encountering visitors from beyond their world for the first time, display considerably more fear or uncertainty. Ellie considered this for a moment before answering. "I suppose we don't scare easy around here," she said simply. "Around these parts, you learn early on that panicking rarely solves anything. Better to stay calm, figure out what's actually happening, and deal with it steadily. Works for storms, works for wild animals wandering too close to the barn, and I suppose it works for unexpected visitors too." Her husband, Daniel Cole, arrived shortly after, returning from work in a nearby field, and displayed the same measured calm upon seeing us, asking practical questions about our journey and our intentions rather than reacting with alarm. As the conversation continued, I found myself increasingly unsettled, not by hostility, which I had half expected based on Yulin's account, but by the complete absence of the fear I had anticipated. These were not soldiers or trained defenders. They were, by every indication, simple farmers, living quiet lives in a small town, and yet they approached an encounter with beings from another world with the same steady practicality they might apply to an unexpected change in weather. Later that afternoon, Ellie mentioned, almost casually, an incident from earlier in the week involving a large predator that had wandered too close to their livestock during the night. "Nothing too exciting," she said, when I asked for details. "Daniel here just went out, made plenty of noise, and it moved along on its own. We lost a bit of sleep, but that's about the size of it." "You confronted a dangerous predator directly, alone, at night?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. Daniel shrugged, seemingly confused by my reaction. "Wasn't much choice in the matter. Can't just let something wander in among the animals and hope it sorts itself out. You deal with the problem in front of you." I exchanged a glance with Doran, both of us clearly processing the same unsettling realization. What this family considered a minor, forgettable inconvenience would, on nearly any other world I had studied, be considered a serious and dangerous confrontation, one likely requiring specialized training or equipment to survive safely. As the day continued, similar moments repeated themselves throughout our visit to the small town. An older man, introduced to us as Walter Higgins, spoke casually about hunting large game with simple tools passed down through generations, treating the practice as an unremarkable part of daily life rather than a dangerous or notable skill. A younger woman named Grace Holloway described, without any apparent concern, navigating dense forest terrain alone during sudden storms, relying on careful observation and steady decision-making rather than fear or hesitation. None of these accounts were told with pride or boastfulness. They were shared simply, matter-of-factly, as though these were ordinary experiences requiring no particular acknowledgement or admiration. By evening, as the town gathered for a simple community meal, welcoming us with genuine warmth, despite our obvious differences, I found myself sitting quietly beside Yulin, watching the relaxed, easy interactions between the town's inhabitants. "This is not what I expected," I admitted quietly. "What did you expect?" Yulin asked. "Fear, perhaps. Aggression. Some indication of the capability you described from your previous encounter with this world." Yulin's expression remained thoughtful. "You are observing exactly the capability I described. You simply expected it to look like hostility, when in truth, it looks like this: calm competence, under circumstances that would frighten most other beings. A complete absence of panic, replaced instead by steady, practical problem-solving. That is precisely what made the original encounter so difficult to counter. This world's inhabitants do not require fear to respond effectively to danger. They simply respond, calmly and directly, treating even remarkable circumstances as ordinary problems requiring ordinary solutions." I considered his words carefully, watching Sophie, the small child who had greeted us so casually earlier, laughing easily with other children nearby, entirely unbothered by our presence among them. "If even their children display this same calm," I said slowly, "then this quality is not merely trained behavior. It is fundamental to how this world shapes every generation that grows up within it." "Precisely," Yulin said, "and that, Zektal, is why this world remains far more dangerous than any obvious display of aggression could ever suggest. A species that panics can be predicted, managed, and eventually overcome. A species that simply adapts, calmly and continuously, without fear, without hesitation, cannot be reliably predicted at all." As evening deepened into night, Captain Doran gathered our small team quietly away from the town's gathering, his expression carrying a seriousness that matched my own growing understanding. "I believe we have gathered sufficient understanding to reconsider this world's classification," he said. "Though I confess, what we have witnessed here does not match any threat I know how to properly categorize within our existing system." "That," I said quietly, "is precisely the problem the Coalition has faced with this world since its very first encounter." Doran glanced toward Yulin, clearly recognizing at last that our older crew members' earlier caution had not been simple nervousness, but hard-earned wisdom from direct, painful experience. "I believe it is time," Doran said slowly, "that you shared with me exactly what you witnessed here, all those years ago." Yulin nodded, his expression heavy with old memory, finally ready to be spoken aloud in full. As the town's gentle lights flickered warmly in the distance behind us, and the sound of easy laughter carried softly on the evening breeze, I understood that we stood at the edge of a truth the Coalition had spent generations trying desperately to bury. And for the first time since our arrival on this world, I felt certain that truth could remain hidden no longer. We walked back toward the shuttle, beneath a sky full of unfamiliar stars, the warm glow of Millbrook fading slowly behind us. Nobody spoke for a long while, each of us carrying the weight of everything we had witnessed that day, until finally we reached the quiet clearing where our vessel waited among the trees. Inside, Captain Doran activated the small recording device used for official mission logs and turned to Yulin with a steady, patient expression. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the very beginning." Yulin took a long breath before speaking, his voice quiet but steady, carrying the careful precision of someone who had rehearsed this account countless times in the privacy of his own memory, yet never before spoken it aloud in full. "When I was young," he began, "I served as a junior technician aboard a vessel assigned to a fleet sent to this system generations ago. Our mission, as I explained to Zektal, was never meant to be a quiet survey. It was intended as a demonstration, a calculated display of strength meant to encourage this world's many divided nations toward peaceful cooperation with the Coalition. Our fleet commanders believed, based on limited observation, that a world without unified planetary governance, still confined to a single solar system, would be simple to impress and easier still to guide toward compliance. We arrived, expecting confusion, perhaps disorganized fear, followed eventually by careful, respectful negotiation." "And instead," Doran asked, "instead, within hours of our arrival, This world's various nations, despite their many differences and frequent disagreements, began coordinating with a speed that stunned every analyst aboard our fleet. Communication networks we believed limited to simple civilian use revealed capabilities far beyond our expectations. Defensive systems, which our scans suggested were outdated by generations compared to our own technology, proved remarkably adaptable, countering our presence through clever, resourceful methods none of us had anticipated. I listened closely, recalling everything I had witnessed throughout our own survey: the storm upon arrival, the fearless wildlife, the calm, practical humans we had met that very day, each piece slowly forming a complete and troubling picture. We suffered losses, Yulin continued, his voice growing quieter, not through any single overwhelming confrontation, but through countless smaller, precise actions taken independently by numerous separate groups across the world, each one adapting to our presence far faster than we could adjust our own strategies. What should have been, by every historical precedent the coalition possessed, an easy demonstration of superiority, became instead a costly, humbling lesson none of us were prepared to learn. Why was this never recorded in official coalition history? Doran asked. Yulin's expression grew heavier, because admitting such a truth publicly would require acknowledging that a civilization, still confined entirely to its own solar system, without any experience of interstellar contact, had matched an advanced fleet not through superior weapons or technology, but through adaptability, coordination, and a complete absence of panic under overwhelming pressure. Rather than accept that uncomfortable truth, coalition leadership chose instead to bury the encounter entirely, erasing detailed records and quietly replacing this world's classification with a simple, ambiguous designation: pending, do not engage. A warning left deliberately vague, ensuring caution without ever requiring public acknowledgement of what truly occurred here. And the term Level 13? Doran asked, echoing the question I had asked Yulin the night before. A private designation, Yulin said, created quietly among survivors of that original encounter, existing nowhere within official records, precisely because acknowledging it openly would mean admitting the depth of our miscalculation. It exists solely as a warning passed quietly among those with first-hand experience of this world, a term meant to capture something far more dangerous than any environmental hazard or aggressive wildlife could ever represent. Doran remained silent for a long moment, absorbing everything Yulin had shared, before turning finally to address the full crew, who had gathered quietly to listen. Based on everything we have witnessed and learned during this survey, he said, I believe it falls to us to determine how this world should truly be classified moving forward, and to ensure that determination is not buried or forgotten as it was before. I stepped forward then, offering my own conclusion, shaped by everything I had personally observed and experienced since our arrival. This world's ecosystem, I said, does not merely tolerate challenge and adversity. It demands constant, relentless adaptation from everything living within it, without exception, across countless generations and multiple catastrophic extinction events. Its intelligent inhabitants, shaped entirely by this same relentless environment, display a remarkable, almost effortless calm under pressure, responding to danger and uncertainty not with fear or panic, but with steady, practical resolve. This calm is not trained behavior reserved for soldiers or specialists. It exists even among their children, suggesting it is fundamental to how this world shapes every single generation raised upon it. I paused, gathering my thoughts carefully before continuing. The Coalition's existing classification system, I said, measures danger through obvious environmental hazards, hostile wildlife, or difficult terrain. This world possesses elements of all these traits, yet none of them fully capture the true nature of the danger it represents. The true danger of this world lies not in what might harm a visitor directly, but in the character of the beings who call it home, a species that adapts constantly, without fear, without hesitation, cannot be reliably predicted, managed, or underestimated using any framework the Coalition currently possesses. Doran nodded slowly, considering my words carefully. "Then we submit our official recommendation," he said. "This world remains classified as pending, with a clear designation restricting further contact, without extensive additional preparation and understanding. We do not repeat the mistake of assuming this world can be measured using standards developed for less demanding environments." Our final night on Earth arrived quietly. The meadow surrounding our shuttle bathed once more in the same peaceful moonlight that had greeted us upon our first arrival. I found myself standing alone near the edge of the tree line, reflecting on everything we had witnessed, when Yulin joined me quietly, his expression calmer now than at any point since our arrival. "You seem more at ease," I observed. "Perhaps," he admitted. "Sharing this burden after so many years carrying it alone has lifted something I did not realize I still carried so heavily." "Do you believe the Coalition will heed our recommendation this time?" I asked. Yulin considered the question carefully before answering. "Perhaps for a while," he said. "Records fade eventually. Memories are buried under bureaucracy, and someday another crew will likely be sent here, believing this pending classification nothing more than an outdated oversight requiring correction. That has always been this world's greatest protection, and perhaps its greatest danger as well." "What do you mean?" "This world's people do not seek conflict," Yulin said quietly. "Everything we witness today, the warmth of their welcome, the calm patience in their questions, suggests a species content to remain within their own world, growing steadily, adapting continuously, without any particular ambition toward conquest or domination beyond their own solar system. And yet, should circumstances ever force them to look outward, truly outward, with the same relentless adaptability that has shaped every generation of life upon this world since its very beginning, I suspect the wider galaxy would find itself entirely unprepared for what that would mean." I considered his words carefully, watching the peaceful meadow stretch out before us beneath the quiet night sky, the same gentle breeze from our very first day continuing to drift softly through the tall grass. "Perhaps," I said finally, "the Coalition's greatest wisdom, whether by careful design or simple fortunate accident, has been leaving this world undisturbed, allowing it to continue growing quietly, adapting steadily, without ever giving it sufficient reason to direct that relentless capability outward toward the wider galaxy. Let us hope," Yulin said softly, "that wisdom continues, long after both of us are gone." The following morning, our shuttle lifted quietly away from the meadow, leaving behind the peaceful town of Millbrook, its warm lights already fading into the gentle countryside below. As we ascended back toward our waiting vessel in orbit, I recorded my final entry into the mission log, choosing my words carefully, aware that whoever read this report in the future deserved a complete and honest account, regardless of how uncomfortable that truth might prove. "This world," I wrote, "does not require obvious monsters, hostile terrain, or overwhelming military strength to earn its careful, hidden classification. Its true danger lies quietly beneath a deceptively peaceful surface, shaped by countless generations of relentless adaptation, embodied fully within a species that responds to extraordinary circumstances with nothing more dramatic than calm, practical resolve. They do not seek conflict, nor do they display any particular ambition beyond their own quiet, steady growth. Yet should circumstances ever change, should this world's people ever find genuine reason to direct their remarkable resilience outward toward the wider galaxy, I believe the Coalition, and perhaps every other civilization among the stars, would discover firsthand exactly why this world has been so carefully, deliberately hidden from history for so long. As our shuttle rejoined the patient Curiosity in orbit, and Earth's peaceful blue and green surface receded slowly behind us, I found myself glancing one final time at the quiet, unassuming world below, understanding fully now why its true classification had remained buried for so many generations. Some dangers, I realized, do not announce themselves through obvious strength or open aggression. Some dangers simply wait, quietly and patiently, growing steadily stronger with every passing generation, content for now to remain undisturbed, yet fully capable, should the need ever arise, of reminding the wider galaxy exactly why certain worlds are better left quietly, respectfully, and permanently alone. And as our vessel turned slowly away, carrying its carefully guarded recommendation back toward the heart of Coalition space, I could not help but wonder how many more generations would pass before someone, somewhere, forgot that lesson once again.